Hello friends, it's Sam Matterface here with the GameDay Podcast from talkSPORT as England sign off with an error-strewn thriller at Wembley in their last game before the World Cup. To discuss it all with me, the Southgate Sceptics. It's talkSPORT football correspondent Alex Crook is here. Hello.
Hello.
And the assistant editor of The Mirror, Darren Lewis as well. Hello.
Hello there.
Coming up, sermon for the Mount, super subs, Pope commits cardinal sin. It's all on the GameDay Podcast from talkSPORT. Well, that was some night to leave Wembley early, wasn't it? Or put your kids to bed when they were 2-0 down, eh, Crook?
Yes, I did do that. 2-0 down. To be fair, it was a school night, and I said to my boys, they're not going to win this now. Off you go to bed. Got the first goal. I thought, well, they're probably still not going to win. Second goal goes in. I shout upstairs, boys, you better come back down. Rewind it. They see the Mount goal, and then, enjoy the entertainment.
Yeah, it was entertaining, wasn't it? I mean, look, it has been really dull watching England all over the summer. There's probably mitigating circumstances for that. There's also been bad tactical decisions that all have contributed to the issues that England have had. But they haven't scored for 343 minutes before last night, then three come at once. And they all came in a very short period at the end of the second half after Gareth Southgate had made some changes, Darren Lewis.
Yeah, it's not like Crooks to make an impulsive move, is it? Just honestly, I mean, look, to be fair to you, Alex, they were terrible for 70 minutes and it looked like more of the same. And in the press box, we were all writing pieces that basically were an extension of what we'd written before. And, I know one colleague, all of us, I wouldn't even point to any colleagues, myself included, we were all writing pieces to suggest that it was going to be quite a long old autumn going into the World Cup for Southgate. And then those changes, and to put those changes into context, there were matches in the semi-final of the World Cup and the final of the Euros where he was forced with a decision that he had to make and couldn't make those changes to actually press home the advantage, go on to win. And yet last night it looked as though he would go on to win after making those changes in the second half. The last 20 minutes, absolutely outstanding. If it were not for Nick Pope making that mistake right at the end, it would have been a really impressive victory.
Yeah, I actually thought the first half they played better than they have done recently. They pressed higher up the field. They committed more bodies. There were brighter moments where they could have scored goals. In fact, actually, if Raheem Sterling had finished his two very good chances that he had, England would have been 2-0 up at half-time and cruising. Second half, they have the setback where Maguire makes the mistake and all of a sudden they seem to go to pieces. Havertz scores a wonder goal and it looks like it's floundering. They get back in the game. They make the changes and all of a sudden they become the dominant force. There's a particular piece of play, a passage of play that comes on around about 80 minutes, just before the the foul on Bellingham, which is the bit that leads to the penalty after the VAR review, where England's football is nothing short of superb. They switch the play from left to right, they go down one side then the other, and they do it with a pace and tempo that we have not seen for them for a while. And that's the England that we want to see. We have to see at the World Cup, Crook.
Yeah, 100% agree. But I don't think overall it's an evening when Southgate's detractors will be silenced because he was almost forced to go on the front foot. They were 2-0 down. He had nothing to lose. He threw on positive attacking changes. I thought both Saka and Mount made a real difference. And that was England at their best, as you say, using that pace down the flanks, getting balls into the penalty area. But that was more by necessity than design. So I still think there's big question marks over Gareth Southgate's natural cautiousness when it comes to tournament football. And I still think probably it's a night when there were more questions than answers. If Jordan Pickford is injured, I think we've got a big problem. Nick Pope, I felt, was a strange selection anyway, for the reasons that you've spoken about previously. Decent shot stopper, although obviously not with the equalising goal, but can't really play out from the back. Ramsdale, for me, is a much more like-for-like replacement, but I think we need Pickford fit. And the centre of defence, Harry Maguire, I mean, that decision to keep faith with a player who looks shot to pieces pretty much every time he plays for Manchester United is really coming back to haunt Gareth Southgate. And that centre-back area is going to stop England, in my opinion, going deep into the draw in Qatar. I just don't see where the solution is.
Well, the thing is that actually Harry Maguire didn't play too badly for the first 54 minutes of this game. His distribution was all right. He came out with the ball a couple of times. He looked okay. and then he makes a mistake, and all of a sudden the thing goes to pieces. And I mean, the penalty as well. I mean, the way that the initial mistake is a miscontrol and then a poor pass, and then to compound that error with a rash tackle to give away the penalty it's just been Harry Maguire doing what Harry Maguire has done over the last 12 months. And I do feel sorry for him. And I'll tell you why I feel sorry for him. Because this is a guy whose confidence has gone from the absolute peak after you'll remember, he was a linchpin of that Manchester United team that got to the Europa League final. And when he was unavailable towards the end of that season, everybody was panicking. Because we're going into a European Championships. Everybody wanted Harry Maguire in the England team. Manchester United fans were like, oh my word, he's not going to make it to the Villarreal game. And he did. He sat on the bench. He couldn't do anything, but he sat on the bench that night. He had played so much football over the course of the preceding year that I think he was just absolutely shot to bits. His body started to let him down, and all of a sudden then his mind has started to let him down, and it's just been on a downward spiral. And it doesn't matter what they do, what anyone does. At the moment, no one can seem to rebuild his confidence. And look, Southgate's obviously trying his hardest to sort of make him feel part of the team and part of the solution. But the recall of Eric Dyer, for me, Darren, actually says, I'm sorry, Harry, you might not actually make that team when it comes out for the Iran game.
And, to some extent, I actually start now to think less about football and more about Harry Maguire. Because there was a point during the second half, he was getting battered on social media. There were lots of people criticising him. And eventually...
But the England fans in the stadium were singing his name. The England fans in the stadium were singing his name.
They were singing his name, but the point is, you and I both know that there has been widespread criticism. We've done it right here on the show. So what the England fans were singing is neither here nor there. The fact is that there is widespread criticism and vilification for Harry Maguire. And eventually you have to get to a point where you say you've got to take him out the firing line for his well-being. Let him rebuild his confidence, get back to a place where he feels he can do the things he used to do. Look, the fact is this. Harry Maguire is not a quick defender. We've had this debate. We've made these very points here on the podcast before. So you can do him for pace. He doesn't seem at the moment able to smell danger. He is a player who is invariably the weakest link. You look at Manchester United now without him, they're a better side. They're more mobile. They're able to smell danger. They're able to cope better with opposition strike forces than they can when Harry Maguire is in the team. So, and just one more point. Football is about form. We seem to have sleepwalked into this era, if you like, where it seems to be a heresy, or we've got to solve the Harry Maguire problem. We don't. And this is why so many people are frustrated, because England have so many good players. What on earth is Ben White doing sitting at home when he's playing for the team that is near the top of the Premier League, when Harry Maguire is being kept faith with? Yes, he was great 16 months ago, but that's a long time ago. And I think we have no chance at the World Cup if we're going to be relying on players who did great for Gareth Southgate a long time ago.
Do you understand why Gareth Southgate still picks him? The argument I think that Gareth would advance if he was sitting here today is that Harry Maguire is someone who understands how his England team want to play football. He is capable of playing on the left of a back three, and there isn't really anybody else who can play in that position with the kind of competency, or not, as Harry Maguire can. Tyrone Mings can play in that position. Would you put him there ahead of Harry Maguire? What other player would you play on the left side of defence that's comfortable on that side of a back three? And he thinks, obviously, because he needs someone there, he has to invest in Harry Maguire because it's in his interest to have him inside the tent. I'm trying to articulate his thoughts.
I hear that, but you know what? If we are in a situation where we're reliant on one player, any one player, and that's why I don't just want to make this about Maguire bashing. We have a fantastic squad of players. If you were to put another manager in charge of this team, playing front foot football, which is what many of them do with their club sides, you would get them scoring 2s and 3s a game, and you would get them going into matches against caliber of opposition of a similar caliber, or even higher caliber opposition with confidence. that they will go into those games, score goals and win games. So if we are at a stage where we are saying, oh my goodness, only Harry Maguire understands how I play in my systems, then that is
I don't think it's only,
really an indictment of the manager.
But I think it's something that he is thinking about. Like, there isn't anybody else who plays on that left-hand side of the defence that can do it and has been part of the squad. Who plays it? Who plays it? Tell me, give me a name. Because if you can give me a name, then I'm sure that he's searching for one too. I'm guessing that. I don't know.
Sam,
I'm sure he's scrambling
Harry
around
Maguire
thinking,
was great at the Euros because he had two defensively minded players in midfield in front of him. He played in a 3. There were two defensively minded players in front of him, Calvin Phillips and Declan Rice, who were able to protect his lack of pace. And I think that because of the kind of football we played back then, which was very safety first, it's football not to lose, or as some people I know call it, 90s football. So he looked better than he was.
I'm with you.
The fact is that if you are looking at an England team that's going to go to the World Cup and actually express themselves, you have to play with a 4. And you have to get creative talents further up the pitch so that they can hurt the opposition rather than playing with a 3 and basically trying not to lose because you can't defend.
I'm totally with you. And I said this on Sunday, on the Sunday session, that England, if they want to be progressive, I said it on the podcast I think we did before the Italy game, if you want to take the game to higher level opposition, if you want to go deep into a World Cup, you've got to play with an extra man in midfield because otherwise you get outnumbered. It was a problem on Friday night against Italy. It was a problem at times during the match against Germany. A 4 gives you the opportunity to play someone else in there alongside Bellingham and Rice and still manage to get players up around Kane, which you need to do because he constantly drops deep. But I'm talking from Gareth Southgate's point of view, and I'm trying to play devil's advocate as to why he's including him. He clearly doesn't believe that there's anybody else that he can trust to put in that position. He may be wrong. He probably is wrong because, I don't know, but maybe even Fikayo Tomori could have played there. But he didn't even include him in the matchday squad last night. So we didn't even get to see that, which seems strange to me. But I can't think of another name. And if you can, please tell me who it is. Who would be your back 4 that you could trust to be really solid and manage to keep clean sheets at a World Cup? That's the problem. The defenders aren't as good as the front battalion, isn't it?
I agree with Darren. I don't think you need to play with a back 3. I think England's best form of defence is to attack. And actually, if you've got Declan Rice as one of those holding midfielders, and I think we're all sold now that the partnership in front of the back 4 is Rice and Bellingham. I don't think there's any debate about that at all. Then Declan Rice, when England are out of possession, has the ability to drop back in and become part of a back 3. So it's about tactical flexibility. The system that worked at the World Cup with Maguire and worked at the Euros isn't going to work, I don't think for England anymore. And I think Gareth Southgate needs to be brave here. It's difficult because there's no more warm-up games between now and the tournament, but he needs to dispense with that and almost draw up a whole new blueprint. You're right to mention Tomori, one of a number of staggering decisions I think that Gareth Southgate has made over this international period. Not to even have him on the bench last night is really poor, actually, for someone who's won the league in Italy, is clearly high in confidence. All the things that Maguire isn't. Not a single minute for Ivan Toney. I know there's an argument that's been advanced by our own Adrian Durham on Twitter this morning to say that it's just as important to have Toney around the group and see what he's like as a tourist, but he should have given him some minutes. And to start Nick Pope and not Aaron Ramsdale in both matches, I think they're 3 big decisions, and to persist with Maguire. So make that 4 big decisions that over the course of this international break, Gareth Southgate has got wrong.
I don't disagree with you, but you've got to remember, first of all, England didn't play a back 3 at the European Championships. In most of the matches, apart from the Germany game and the Italy game, they played a back 4. And it was Stones and Maguire playing together with 2 deeper holding midfield players. So ultimately, England did play a back 4 at the last tournament for pretty much 80% of the time. So they have done it. They can do it. Why haven't they done it going into this tournament? I don't understand it, and I've advanced that argument for the last 2-3 days. I think they should be. The Nick Pope question shouldn't be in the England squad. Nick Pope's not good enough with his feet. We saw that within 2 minutes. I texted you the minute the team sheet came out and said to you, the problem with Nick Pope is he can't kick. Within 4 minutes of the game, he's being closed down and almost ended up giving the ball to Hoffman to put the ball into his own net. Obviously, he's done very, very well. They've picked him on form because he's got the best save percentage in the league. He's kept clean sheets. He's been the player of the month for August, and he's done very well in the Newcastle goal. But ultimately, when it comes to England, he is not good enough to be the goalkeeper because England require you to play with your feet. Ramsdale can do that. He should be the number 2, and I think he's probably established himself as a number 2 without actually playing in this international break. In terms of... Go on, Darren, you wanted to come back on something that Crook just said.
Well, I did, because I think if you look at all of the managers in the Premier League that have their teams playing free, fast-flowing football, they're all progressive managers. They play with a 4, and they have players in whom they have faith. And if there are defensive deficiencies, they are able to mask those deficiencies because of the forward-thinking football that they played. And I heard elements of some of the stuff that Southgate was saying over the last couple of days that just gave rise to another issue, which is he was saying it comes with the job, right? And he was trying to kind of talk in terms that this England job is a very fickle and, it's like the impossible job kind of thing. He didn't use those words, impossible job, just to be clear, but he was kind of talking about how he's heard other managers get it in the past. And how, look, I think this job is not a difficult job. He's got better players, more of the better players available to him than lots of other England managers have had for a very, very long time. We know what his preferred 11 is going to be. They were relegated before the Germany game, but the Germany game became about PR rather than about playing the players who should have got minutes in it, because he knew that had we lost, the mood around England would have been negative going into the World Cup. And I think that affected his decision-making.
Didn't he just pick his first team? Did he just pick his first team?
What would we learn from him picking his first team? Why call it, like, as Crook's been saying, these games, the Nations League itself, should be about calling players up. Adrian said it last week. Getting players up, calling players up, looking at systems, looking at the way we play, and giving us some evidence that going into the World Cup, we've evolved from the Euros. I don't see that about this England team. And what I saw on Monday night was a team picked to ensure that as we move away from the Nations League and go into the World Cup, that gap in between of around 50-odd days, people are going to be saying good things about the team rather than actually debating the merits of players who should be knocking on the door. I feel huge amounts of sympathy for those players at Crook named that are not going to get anywhere near it, because you can't possibly take them now having not played for England at all. And that's not what this England squad and this England contingent with so many wonderful players at his disposal should be about. Tired old squad. I'm not saying that they're the bad players in their old squad, because as I've tweeted ahead of this show, I think no one will ever convince me that we don't have the players, but we should be making more of them at our disposal so that there is pressure on the players who are already in that first team squad, and we're not doing that.
But the other argument is it's the last game before the World Cup. The back three needed a little bit of work, and he needed to make sure that his first choice 11 had some minutes together if they're going to develop connections before the World Cup. The time for experimenting was in the summer, and he did experiment during the summer because he played Ramsdale twice in goal. He played Tammy Abraham from the start in a game against Italy, which they drew 0-0. He brought in Jared Bowen, who played in every single game in those 4 matches over the course of the summer. So there was experimentation at that point, and that was when he was supposed to, bring in that new blood. He didn't bring in Tony, which was a bit of a surprise for me during the summer, because he actually advanced to me privately that he was going to do that, and he didn't, and he waited till this group. So this last 2 matches was all about refining the team going into the World Cup for him, I think, and that's why he played pretty much a similar team.
Then. So here's my question to you then. Is that refinement, should we take it as read that Maguire will start come what may?
Yeah, but I think I told you that about a year ago.
And there's my second question to you. Does that for you represent progress?
No. It represents a situation where the manager believes that he does not trust his defence. And as a result of that, he thinks the only way to win a tournament, and if you go back through the history of tournaments, most tournaments are won by the teams that concede the fewest amount of goals, that he thinks he can eke his way through a tournament by keeping as keeping it as solid at the back as possible and trying to grab the odd goal. Do I think that that's a good plan going forward this World Cup? No, I don't think they're going to do very well at this World Cup. I actually think they're going to be lucky to get to a quarter-final because I don't think that the team has evolved enough to scare anybody. And a back three with two full-backs that don't get high and wide enough for me to create problems, and a striker that keeps dropping deep into midfield and is never in the penalty box is not going to be a recipe for success. I totally agree with you. But I'm trying to give you the other side. It's very easy to sit here and just say it's all rubbish. But we've got to find out why it's rubbish. We've got to find out what the reasons are.
Sam, none of us have done that. None of us, and I think Crook, I can't speak for you. I know you can speak for yourself, but none of us have done that. We are all invested in England doing well. And what we're doing is looking at specific areas of the team and talking about where they can improve. Our whole discourse around this on the podcast, on talkSPORT, has never been about their old rubbish. As I said before, I tweeted this morning, we have the players. We have the players. We simply have to find a better way to play.
I totally agree
with that. And I think it's the easiest thing in the world, actually, to suggest that everybody is on Southgate's back. This is not a Southgate issue. This is a tactics issue, because Southgate is one of the best England managers we've had for a long time. But it's not untrue to say that everybody has a right. This is the nation's football team. Everyone listening to this will have a view on who we should pick and how we should play. To express that view is not to be anti-Southgate and is not to say that it's all rubbish, because that's not the case.
I do think that we should have a conversation with it. And I think that the big thing that I think people were advancing prior to the weekend was that he didn't pick players that were in form. And I did a whole thing on Sunday, on the Sunday session, where I went through the starting 11 from this week and said, like, every single one of those players, apart from Harry Maguire, is in form and is playing for their clubs, and most of their clubs are doing quite well, with the exception of maybe Declan Rice, who hasn't had a great start to the season, but you couldn't really give me another name of someone who could play in his position. He is going to be integral to England going to the World Cup. And whereas you can't pick entirely on form, pretty much most of the players that were selected in the 11s for both games were. Luke Shaw obviously was not, because he hasn't played any minutes for Manchester United, but actually didn't play too badly during the game against Germany on Monday night. I think another big issue is the fact that we mentioned Tomori, that he'd left out of the squad. Tony didn't get any minutes. Abraham didn't even come on, did he, during the game last night? No. So that is a problem for me, because you do need an alternative to Harry Kane. And Harry Kane isn't just there to play every single minute of every single match. But Trent Alexander-Arnold was left out of the match day squad. Is that Gareth Southgate saying, I know what Trent Alexander-Arnold can do, so I'm not worried about having to view him? Or is he sending a message that you're not going to be in my plans when it comes to November?
Well, only Gareth Southgate will have the answer to that, but I do think it creates unnecessary PR with an issue that has been rumbling for some time now. We've heard Jurgen Klopp get involved when Alexander-Arnold was left out of a previous squad. So I think the sensible thing to do would have been to include him on the bench. The same for the likes of Tomori and Tony as well. So I do think he made some baffling decisions. And I'll just take issue with your point about picking players on form. On form, if we're going back to the start of this season, Jadon Sancho should have been in the squad ahead of Jarrod Bowen. On form, as you mentioned, Luke Shaw shouldn't really have been in the squad because he's not playing any minutes for Manchester United. Calvin Phillips was called up originally. He's played 20 Premier League minutes this season. That isn't picking players on form. So I understand what you're saying, and I think part of the problem actually is, again, to go against what you were talking about there are a lot of England players who have underperformed at the start of the season. Mason Mount is another. I think his goal will do him the world of good coming off the bench last night. But I don't think it was a squad picked by utilising the best English players since the start of the season. I think that's what it should have been.
Yeah, but that's not what I said, is it? I said the team that was picked on Friday and Saturday was largely a team of players that were in form. The squad is a different matter. You can't just pick... I mean, you can just before a World Cup, which I'm sure you've been planning for the last 18 months, just go out and just pick the 20 best England outfield players. But that's not really going to work, is it, over the longer term?
But who's got more of a chance of being on the plane for the World Cup, in your opinion? Jadon Sancho or Jarrod Bowen? If Sancho maintains his level of form, I think Southgate would pick him ahead of Jarrod Bowen. You've always had reservations about whether Bowen would go to the World Cup or not. So explain to me how that decision for this squad makes sense.
Because Jadon Sancho has not performed well for England over the course of the last 2 years. So he looked in the summer at alternatives.
You don't think Sancho deserved to call up ahead of Bowen this time around?
I think he's played reasonably well this season. Reasonably well. He hasn't really he hasn't pulled up any trees. He's not played as well as some of the others in the squad. But to be honest with you, I think he's got a lot of work to do to restore the trust with the manager. And the same with Marcus Rashford. Marcus Rashford went through a period where he would not turn up to England duty because he was fatigued, tired, or had an injury. Over 2 years, I think he went to, out of 8 squads, he turned up for 3 when he was picked in them. And I think the manager had a situation where he kept talking to him and said, "Do you actually want to be in the England squad?" Rashford said, no, I really, really like it. And then would cry off the next time that the squad came around because of some mysterious reason. And actually, in the end, the manager thought, well, I'm not going to pick him anymore because he doesn't want to be here. So if he doesn't want to be here and he's not performing particularly well, what's the point in me continuing to try and invest in someone who doesn't want to be around? And I think he felt as if there was a little bit of ill discipline at Manchester United at the time. And Sancho was probably part of that as well. And Sancho wasn't playing very well. Let's not pretend that he was pulling up trees last season. He got left out too. And in the end, he just moved on. I think that's probably more like it. I actually think Sancho might get a call up for the World Cup. But I understand why. I understand why he hasn't called him up until this point. He hasn't done anything to put his hand up and say, "You must pick me."
And the Calvin Phillips one, can we explain that?
He hasn't got anybody else in central midfield. I mean, can you give me another alternative of who you would have called up? You've got a 28-man squad. Who else would you have called up in the centre of midfield instead of Rice, Bellingham, Henderson, Ward-Prowse, and Calvin Phillips? Give me
James
another
Maddison.
name. He doesn't play in central midfield. He plays as a number 10.
Yeah, but you didn't need another holding midfielder, really, did you? Because you've got Rice and Bellingham, you've got Ward-Prowse who can play there. Again, I think on form, you struggle to make a case that James Maddison didn't deserve to be in the squad.
Well, if you're taking Jarrod Bowen out of the squad, then you can put James Maddison in, and Maddison's statistics are absolutely brilliant. But again, I mean, you'd have to ask Gareth Southgate, but I'm guessing that's to do with trust, right, Darren, because of what happened before.
Yeah, I mean, it would appear that Southgate has issues with Maddison's character rather than Maddison's ability. And I think in the rugby, was it Eddie Jones had a policy of a certain type of player that he didn't want within his squad. I'm not casting any aspersions on. That was the policy, yeah. And I don't know anything about Maddison's character to cast any kind of aspersions on there. No. But it would appear that because you look at Maddison's form, you look at the wonderful goal he scored against Spurs, you look at the way that there's been a consistency about his form, and I think Crook is right. As a player, if you're picking on form, you look at him and you get him in there. Listen, you can know who your best 11 are, but you can still also look at other players. Italy do it, Germany do it, France do it, but we seem to be wedded to needing to stick by the same old players. And it's quite a tired, dated kind of attitude, if you like, in terms of, oh yeah, if I'm loyal to these players, they're going to be loyal to me. We know you are loyal to them. We know that ultimately you will go for those players. But if you're not picking other players, then you're sending a message out to all of those players that they may as well not fight to get into your plans, and they may as well prioritise their clubs. Just one other thing as well. You talk about who else you could have put in there, and we are recording this on a day that Martin Samuel, a colleague of mine, in the press, has written a terrific piece suggesting that maybe Southgate abandoned the idea of playing Trent Alexander-Arnold in midfield too soon. And before you scoff at that, who plays in midfield and does very, very well indeed for Germany and for Bayern Munich? Joshua Kimmich. Where does he normally play? Right back. So, there are other managers who are forward-thinking, who are able to experiment and do the kind of thing that they think can get results from their players. But we have a good manager, the best manager of the last 30 years. The results have said it, and the distance he's gone into tournaments have suggested that as well, and the feel-good factor around England. But we are not making the most of the talents at our disposal, and that's a real shame.
England's Trent Alexander-Arnold admits he found it difficult to get on the ball in makeshift midfield role for England against Andorra, and says he revelled in finding more space at right back in the second half when he was moved back. That is from the Daily Mail the day after he played against Andorra.
I knew you'd do that. And I knew you would do that.
Why would you play the best right back in the world in midfield? That's what Jurgen Klopp said. And now you want him to play him in midfield. He doesn't even want to play there.
Well, I'm going to explain that. I'll explain. The piece that Martin's written, he says it was one game. Okay, you can play him in there.
It wasn't even one game. It was 45 minutes.
But, well, exactly. And what Martin is saying is that he abandoned it possibly too soon. And you would have to say he has a point. Because if you look at Trent's passing range, when you look at Trent's ability to get balls in from the wide areas, he is no England team should be without those abilities, in my opinion. And you can say, yes, Reece James is a better defender, Kieran Trippier is a better defender, fine. But then you find a way to factor him in. And what Klopp was saying is, how come he's not in the team? Yeah. Okay, you can argue that how come he wasn't playing at right back. But as I said before, Southgate's a very safety-first manager. So he's never going to play him ahead of the other two that I mentioned. But you've got to find a way to have him in. You've got to find a way to have somebody who can provide what he has done. And you think about what he has won, everything bar the Europa League with his club, and you're telling me there's no place in an England team for him.
Well, no, look,
good luck.
Ultimately, you can't have three right backs in the team, and that is the manager's choice as to who he has. I mean, Trent Alexander-Arnold is the most creative player in the Premier League in terms of his output in assists and big chances created over the course of the last 2 years. I think we're certainly up there. So you would think that would be the first thing you tried to do, is try and build a team which could cover for his defensive deficiencies. But when you've got other defensive deficiencies and you don't have Virgil van Dijk in your team and you don't have someone that can go out and cover for him, maybe you do have to sacrifice Trent because you need more solidity down that right-hand side. I don't know, I'm just guessing. But you can't tell me that it's a good idea, it's not a good idea, to play Bukayo Saka at left wing-back where he doesn't play for his club because he hasn't got no form in that position, and then say, yeah, but what we'll do is we'll put Trent, who never plays in midfield for Liverpool, into an England team at the top of international football, playing in a position he doesn't play for his club. It doesn't make sense.
Crook, I'll let you come in there, but I'll just say one more thing. That's, as Crook has been saying, what I've been saying, what these games are about. Give him a run of games in that position.
But it didn't work against Andorra.
Use the Nations League.
If it's not going to work against Andorra,
yeah, exactly.
It's not going to work against Italy.
45 minutes against Andorra. For 45 minutes, you're making a huge leap from a friendly against Andorra to a competitive game against Italy. Yeah.
No, it was a competitive game against Andorra. And he said it, not me. He said he didn't like it.
Look, hang on. He said he didn't like it, he didn't prefer it. But I'm much certain he would prefer to play than not to play.
Maybe, that's probably true.
And I think if you look at somebody as accomplished as Joshua Kimmich, who is in the Bayern side, in the Germany side, who's been given the confidence by managers like Hansi Flick and Joachim Löw to be able to express himself, you can see that if you got the right manager who can show you how to play a position, you can make it work. I'll give you one more example. For international duty, Gabriel Jesus says to Chiche, I don't want to play centre forward, I'd rather play out on the right. Mikel Arteta says to him, no, I don't want you on the right, I want you as a centre forward, taking responsibility. I can give you the confidence to make that position work. You're telling me that Gabriel Jesus is struggling in the 9 position for Arsenal?
No, he plays in a slightly different role. He drops deep. He's a false 9 almost because he's allowed to do whatever he likes. He's got a free role, and the other two go beyond him.
Because
Martinelli
he's
and
been
Saka.
given the responsibility and the confidence by his manager.
It's a different framework. The manager's got hours and hours
and
hours on the training ground to work on there. It's like you're talking about Joshua Kimmich. Kimmich has been playing in midfield for ages. He plays every game for Bayern Munich in midfield. Trent doesn't do that. He hasn't got time on the training ground to do that. You've got 2 days before a game.
He doesn't.
So,
He
yes,
doesn't.
Mikel Arteta has the opportunity to do that. Hansi Flick has the opportunity to do it with his Bayern manager. And now Julian Nagelsmann. But Gareth Southgate doesn't have that time to convert Trent into a midfield player. That's got to come from the club, which it did do with Kimmich, because at Bayern Munich, he plays in midfield.
Do you two need me, or shall I go and pop off and make a cup of tea and a slice of toast? Listen, can I just... One final thing that I'd like to say. I think this Nations League campaign for a lot of the nations who are going to the World Cup has not been about winning and maintaining Group A status or promotion to Group A. We've seen Wales obviously relegated. They're not too fussed because they're going to their first World Cup in a long, long time. I think for England, Gareth Southgate wanted to use it as a learning curve. I don't think he's learnt enough over these 6 matches, and that's because I think a lot of the decisions that he's made along the way haven't enabled him to learn enough. Do we know if Tammy Abraham is a good enough backup option for Harry Kane? No, we don't, because Harry Kane has started too many games. Do we know if Ivan Toney is capable of making the step up to international football? No, we don't, because we haven't seen him in these last 2 fixtures. Do we know if Tomori is a viable option for the World Cup? No, we don't, because he's not played enough minutes. Do we know if we can go and utilise different systems? No, we don't, because he hasn't experimented with different formations and different players playing out of position, as Gareth Southgate has suggested. And I think actually there's a lot of disillusioned players in this squad now that will be on the plane to Qatar. I've mentioned some of those. Abraham knows that ultimately Gareth Southgate doesn't fancy him. Tomori the same. James Ward-Prowse, who's a brilliant stalwart, turns up camp in, camp out. He was left out of the European Championships. I think he'll get into this squad just because obviously you're allowed to take a bigger squad. But he knows ultimately that Gareth Southgate doesn't really trust him at international level. So I think these 6 games, this Nations League campaign, have caused more headaches for Gareth Southgate because of the decisions that he has, or more importantly, hasn't made, than they've sold.
Yeah, maybe. I think that we have failed to factor in the fact that there were 4 games in a 12-day spell, which was ludicrous. The calendar is absolutely off the charts bonkers. The 2 games now have come at the beginning of a season when traditionally it's never great anyway, but also there's no games between now and the World Cup, which again is ludicrous. The World Cup being placed where it is a problem, and that has affected preparation. So you had the time that you wanted to experiment came at the end of a long, hard season when, you know, clubs had already played 60 matches. The big clubs that we've got in this country had already played 60 matches, and then you've got a start to the season where players aren't necessarily in form, and you're struggling to try and cobble together a 11 that's going to start the World Cup, which you've got 50 days between games to plan for. So I don't think it's particularly easy for anyone, really, players, managers, supporters, or journalists, because, you know, finding stories about it, you've got to find a story somehow about it, and it's not easy. It's not easy to analyse with any real authority, because it isn't going to be the same when they get to the World Cup. Everything's going to be different. It was interesting. I spoke to Graham Souness yesterday, and he was saying, You're over-egging everything, because ultimately no one cares about these games. As a player, no one cares about this game. He goes, if I was a manager scouting a player and I thought that this was an opportunity to go and see a player, we're not talking about that though, are we? We're talking about the players that played in the game, and they may well care, but it's not about that. It's about being 5% less competitive than you would be in a proper competitive international. You take your foot off the gas for 5 seconds, and you know you get punished. And he was saying, because it's not as important, these Nations League games, as a qualifier or a World Cup game, you're defeating yourself, beating everybody up about the fact that they haven't performed well, because ultimately, when they get to a World Cup, it's going to be completely different. The whole thing's going to be completely different. Hey, listen, I hope it's completely different, because if it is anywhere near as flat as it was in the summer, or as flat as it was against Italy, then England are going to have a major, major problem. Right, we've got to finish up now, but I'll give you a quick opportunity to tell me your England team for the first game in the World Cup. Why not? Let's do that. I'm sure, Crook, you've already done this, so why don't you tell us, go first?
I did. We did it on the boot room on Sunday night. We all went with a back 4. Actually, myself, Adebayo, Akinfenwa and Darren Ambrose. Pickford in goal is a no-brainer. I think Reece James at right back, although I didn't think he was great, actually, for 75 minutes against Germany. I went with, at the heart of my defence, I went with Tomori, and I went, in the end, I think, with John Stones. At left back, I actually went with Kieran Trippier ahead of Shaw and Chilwell. Again, I'm picking on form, and he's proved he can do that role for England. Holding midfield is a no-brainer. Declan Rice, because he can drop into that back three as well, alongside Jude Bellingham. This was a bit controversial. I went Saka on the right, nothing controversial there. Sterling on the left. I dropped Harry Kane into the number 10 position because, as you've already mentioned, Sam, he spends so much of his time doing that anyway. And I put Callum Wilson up front, assuming that he's fully fit and still scoring goals.
He ain't going to be in the squad.
Let's see what he does
Darren?
between now and November.
Darren?
Do you know, if Callum Wilson's in the squad, right, in the words of the great Les Dennis, I'll give you the money myself.
I'll remind you of that when we do our World Cup previews and Callum scored 15 goals.
I love Callum, but I can't see Southgate picking him. I'd go Ramsdale in goal. I love Ramsdale as a player. I know he won't pick him. I know he'll go with Pickford, but I'll go Ramsdale in goal. Trent at right back because I want to play some front foot football. Ben White, John Stones. I'm going to go with Chilwell at left back just on the basis that I want round pegs in round holes, not because of his form, but I'm assuming that Chilwell's going to play regular first team football between now and the World Cup. I would play Bellingham and Rice. I'll play Rice as the pivot, so as the holder. I don't need two. I'd play Bellingham and Foden, probably. I don't really like playing in the central position, but I want to get Sterling into the team on the left. I want to get Kane up front, and I'm going to get Saka on the right side.
Okay, I'm going to play Pickford in goal, Walker at right back, Stones and Tomori or Dyer, whoever's in the greatest form at the time, as the second centre-half, and then Chilwell at left back. I'll play Rice as the holding midfield player with two either side of him, Bellingham one side and Mount, and then Saka, Kane and Sterling as the front three. You can send us yours.
We agree a lot there.
Yeah. Well, I think the problem is that we probably all do agree. There's not much to disagree on.
I think there's just 3 of the 4 defenders and the goalkeeper where we disagree slightly.
Who are you picking goalkeeper? You're picking. Everyone's picking Pickford, right?
No, I like Ramsdale. I like Ramsdale a lot, and just for a variety of reasons which we don't have time for. But I like Ramsdale a lot. But I accept that he'll pick Pickford.
Okay. Well, listen, gentlemen, it's been a heated and fun.
As were you two.
It's always good. As Darren says,
No, it should be talking about England.
It's the nation's team. We're allowed to debate it, and we're allowed to debate it from a variety of different positions. The fact is actually we agree on most things, but it's good to air it. It's good to air it. We want them to improve. We want them to get better. We want them to be successful at the World Cup. In fact, we're desperate for them to be successful at the World Cup. Let's hope that they are. We'll be back on Thursday. The podcast will land Thursday afternoon when we're previewing all the Premier League football, and it's going to be a massive weekend of Premier League football as well, because on talkSPORT we've got live coverage of the North London derby. That starts the weekend, and the weekend ends with the Battle of the Bottom. Who gets fired, Rodgers or Cooper? Leicester against Nottingham Forest is live on the Monday Night Football. Thank you, Darren. Thank you, Crookie. We'll see you on Thursday.